When my grandpa died, he left me his whole $10 million estate. My parents, who disowned me at 18, arrived in black suits, grinning, "Don't worry, we'll take care of everything." Then the lawyer flipped the page and said, per his last wish, "You two get nothing." I've never seen them go white so fast. 3 weeks ago, I watched my parents, Eleanor and David, stroll into Grandpa Arthur's memorial in matching black suits, looking like they were ready to collect an inheritance, not mourn the man who saved my life. The man they'd ghosted for years, the same man who helped raise me after they'd thrown me out at 18, calling me a disgrace. The air in the chapel was thick with unspoken grief and a tension that had nothing to do with sorrow. Every polite smile, every hushed word felt like a lie, especially with them there. Growing up, my parents always made it clear I was the family disappointment. My dad, a strict military man turned executive, saw emotions as weakness. My mom, a former beauty queen, traded her crown for charity galas and cared only for appearances. My younger sister, Chloe, was their golden child, perfect grades, homecoming queen, cheer captain, early admission to Sterling University, the whole glossy catalog. Meanwhile, I was the weird one, sketching dragons in notebooks, skipping pep rallies to finish comic books in the library. At first, they thought my creativity was a phase. Then, rebellion. But when I told them I wanted art school and wasn't going to pretend to be straight to make their friends comfortable, they cut me off. "Don't bother coming back once you walk out that door," David said that night, his voice ice. "We're done coddling failure." I left with a duffel bag and $300. I didn't even get to keep Barkley, my childhood dog. But one person didn't turn his back on me, Grandpa Arthur. He'd always been a quiet presence, my mother's father, a retired mechanic with a crooked smile and grease-stained hands. He lived in a modest 2-story house just outside of town, the one Eleanor grew up in before she decided she was above it. When I had nowhere else to go, Grandpa Arthur cleared out his garage studio. "It ain't much," he said, "but it's yours if you want it." That man saved me. He let me crash there rent-free, fed me, and encouraged my illustration dreams when no one else would. My first freelance gig came while sketching portraits of Barkley from memory on his back porch. He even helped me set up a tiny online shop. Over the next few years, I built a small but steady career in comic art and character design. Nothing glamorous, but it was mine. And every step, Grandpa Arthur was there with his thermos of black coffee, his gruff advice, and his endless support. We grew close, closer than I ever was with my parents. And slowly, he opened up. Turns out, Grandpa Arthur wasn't as modest as he seemed. Behind that worn-down pickup and oil-stained overalls was a man who'd made some smart investments. Classic cars, industrial real estate, a few stocks he'd forgotten about in the 90s that exploded. He wasn't flashy about it. But one evening by the fire pit, he handed me a thick binder labeled Estate. He just said, "I've got more than enough for a rainy day, and I want to make sure you're the one who benefits. Not your mother, not your father. You." I laughed, thinking he was being sentimental. He was 84 and still fixing his own sink. But he looked me dead in the eyes. "I need you to promise me something, Liam. When the time comes, don't let them snake their way back in." I promised. Then, a few months ago, he got sick. It came fast. One week he was cracking jokes about my millennial friends, the next he was in the hospital, lungs failing, kidneys shot. I visited him every day, talked to doctors, managed the hospice care. My parents? Not a single call. Not even a sympathy card. Yet, when Grandpa Arthur passed and the memorial was announced, guess who suddenly remembered he existed? Eleanor and David. They showed up at the church wearing designer sunglasses and smug expressions, like walking onto a movie set. Chloe came too, but she hung back, looking unsure. I hadn't spoken to her in years either. Last I heard, she was working in high-powered finance in Chicago, dating a guy named Carter who owned a boat. I didn't approach them. I just stood near the casket and let them do their performance, hugging people they hadn't seen in a decade, dabbing their eyes at the perfect angle for sympathy, even cornering the pastor afterward with stories about Grandpa Arthur fixing their bikes as kids. It was disgusting. But the real insult came at the post-funeral reception. There was an awkward gathering at the community hall, catered by a local bakery Grandpa used to love. I was thanking guests when I saw my parents at a corner table, already discussing the house, as in, Grandpa Arthur's home, the one I'd lived in for 9 years. I caught just a fragment as I walked past. "We'll probably gut the kitchen first," Eleanor was saying, swirling her wine like she was on House Hunters. "Make it more modern. That old stove's a fire hazard." David nodded. "Shouldn't take long to get an evaluation. Market's hot. If we offload the place before Q3, we can push it into a trust and minimize tax liability." That's when I stopped. "Excuse me?" They both turned. Eleanor offered a smile so fake it should have come with a barcode. "Liam, I was just saying how much potential the house has. Don't worry, we'll handle everything. You've done enough." I stared at her, then at David. "I live in that house." He gave a tight, patronizing chuckle. "Yes, and we appreciate you keeping it in decent shape, but it's time for the family to make real decisions now." I couldn't believe it. The audacity. These people hadn't spoken to me in almost a decade. They hadn't cared when I was couch surfing, job hunting, or caring for the man they ignored in his final months. And now, suddenly, they were entitled to everything. I bit back every word, not arguing, not yet. I just walked away. But I made one stop before leaving, to Grandpa Arthur's lawyer, Mr. Davies, a stoic, gray-haired man who'd known Grandpa for over 40 years. He was sipping decaf and nodding to condolences from another guest. When he saw me, he set down his cup. "Is everything all right, Liam?" I leaned in, lowering my voice. "They're already planning renovations for the house." He gave me a long look. "They'll be disappointed. But don't worry. Your grandfather's final instructions were very clear. The will reading is in a few days. Just be there." And oh, I was going to be there. They were in for a surprise. They just didn't know it yet. 3 days after the funeral, I got a call from Mr. Davies's office confirming the will reading. Thursday morning, 10 a.m. sharp, formal attire. He said those last 2 words like they held some special meaning. I didn't sleep much the night before. My brain kept replaying that reception, the way my parents talked about Grandpa Arthur's house like it was already theirs, the way Eleanor touched my arm like we were old friends, the way David looked right through me like I was still 18 and too soft to matter. I kept wondering if I was overthinking it. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding, a tone taken the wrong way. But then at 11:42 p.m., my phone lit up. It was Chloe. Just seeing her name gave me a strange jolt. We hadn't talked properly since I left home. She'd sent a couple of birthday texts over the years, vague and safe, "Hope you're doing well. Thinking of you." I never responded. Not because I hated her, far from it, but because I didn't know which version of Chloe I'd be getting. The sister who used to bring me orange slices after gym class, or the one who called me a drama queen the night our parents kicked me out. Still, I answered. Some part of me was curious. "Hey," she said, her voice quiet. "I know it's late." A pause. Then, "I wanted to give you a heads up." I sat up in bed. "About what?" "They think they're getting everything," she whispered. "Dad's been on the phone with some realtor in Henderson, and Mom's already going through Grandpa's furniture catalog. She keeps talking about how quaint it all is." I didn't respond. I could feel something cold settling in my chest. "They think you'll hand over the keys after the will's read," Chloe continued. "They said you'd do the right thing." "Did you tell them the right thing is letting me grieve in the house I lived in for nearly a decade?" "No," she said. I didn't say anything. Of course, she didn't. Chloe never did. Always stayed out of the line of fire. Switzerland and our family war. "Why are you calling me, Chloe?" Another pause. "Because I'm not sure if they're right or not." "About the will." "About you." She sounded so tired, like a balloon slowly leaking air for years. I remembered that look on her face when she was a teenager, back when she'd lock herself in her room and cry silently into her pillow. We'd never talked about it, but I'd heard her. Well, I said, you'll find out tomorrow. The line went silent. Then she hung up. I stared at the screen for a long time, feeling a weird mix of sadness and fury knotting up in my chest. That call wasn't about warning me. It was about measuring me, seeing if I'd bent. But I'd already bent once, and it nearly broke me. The office was sleek and cold. Polished wood floors, glass walls, chairs that looked expensive but felt like sitting on gilt. My parents arrived 10 minutes early, all business, holding lattes, wearing designer black like prepping for a photo shoot. David shook Mr. Davies's hand with the kind of confidence that made my skin crawl. Eleanor gave me a small nod, then sat down and pulled out her phone, already scrolling through Zillow listings. Chloe walked in just before 10 o'clock. She looked different than I remembered, sharper, maybe. Her hair was shorter, cut into a blunt bob, and her heels clicked across the floor like punctuation. She didn't sit next to me. She didn't sit next to them. She chose the empty chair across the table, like she was watching a chess match unfold. Mr. Davies entered last, holding a thick manila folder that looked older than half the people in the room. He sat, cleared his throat, and said, "Let's begin." What followed was surreal. He started with the formalities, Grandpa Arthur's full name, date of death, legal standing. Then he began reading the will. There were small bequests, a few sentimental items to old friends, a donation to his favorite animal shelter, a letter to his old mechanic buddy. Then he paused, turned a page, and looked at me. "Liam," he said, "your grandfather left the entirety of his liquid assets, properties, and investments, totaling an estimated $10.3 million at time of evaluation, to you." Silence. Complete, deafening, stomach-turning silence. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. David scoffed. "Excuse me?" Eleanor let out a soft, almost comical laugh. That can't be right." Mr. Davies didn't flinch. "It's correct. As per the revised and notarized will, updated 7 months ago." "You mean to tell me?" David's voice rose, "that this entire estate, everything, is going to him? The boy who abandoned this family?" I was thrown out, I muttered. David snapped toward me. "Don't play the victim, Liam. You told me to leave, Dad. You said I was dead to you. You made it pretty clear." Eleanor blinked like she was waking up from a dream. No, this can't be right. We're his children. We're supposed to be the beneficiaries." Per Mr. Raymond Hutchins's final request, Mr. Davies said, flipping to the next page, he has included a statement to be read aloud. He pulled out a single sheet of paper and began reading. "To Eleanor and David, you both stopped being my children the moment you turned your back on my grandson. Blood may be thicker than water, but love is thicker than either. I raised Liam not because I had to, but because you didn't. And I won't reward neglect with inheritance. You get nothing. And before you call it cruel, remember who made the first cut." Eleanor's hand shot to her mouth. David's jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. Mr. Davies folded the letter and placed it gently on the table. "That concludes the will." They didn't speak. They didn't even look at me. Chloe did, though. She didn't look angry or shocked. She just looked hollow, like someone who had seen this coming and still wasn't prepared. They stood up slowly, stiffly. David muttered something under his breath I didn't catch. Eleanor gathered her purse like it was the last scrap of dignity she had left, and then they left. I should have felt victorious. I should have felt like I'd won. But all I felt was numb. That should have been the end of it. A clean break, a quiet line in the sand. But of course, that's not how my family works. The next day, I found my tires slashed. All 4. I was parked right outside the house, my house, the same one my parents had tried to gut for resale. I stood there, staring at the shredded rubber, and knew it wasn't random. This wasn't some drunk teenager with a grudge. This was personal. Then came the texts, blocked numbers, no names. Hope you enjoy your blood money. Funny how fast people change when they get a little cash. Grandpa must be rolling in his grave. I didn't respond, but they kept coming. My social media blew up with fake accounts calling me selfish. I got tagged in posts accusing me of elder manipulation. One even posted an old photo of me at 17, braces, oversized hoodie, holding up a drawing of a robot. The caption read, "This is who stole our family legacy." Then Chloe showed up unannounced at my front door. She looked even more exhausted than before. Her eyes had a watery glassiness, like she hadn't slept in days. "I need to talk to you," she said. I let her in. She paced the living room for a solid minute before saying anything. Then she dropped onto the couch and exhaled. "They're spiraling," she said. "Dad thinks you somehow tricked Grandpa into changing the will. Mom's already calling lawyers. They're saying you manipulated him when he was sick." I leaned against the kitchen counter, arms folded. "So what? Now I'm the villain?" "I'm not saying it's true," she said, "I'm just telling you what they're saying." "Why are you really here, Chloe?" She looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw it, the guilt, raw and heavy. "Because I think they're planning something. Something worse than slashing tires or sending threats." My stomach tightened. "Like what?" She hesitated. "I don't know. But Dad said something last night. He said, if Liam wants to act like this is war, then fine. He'll find out how far we're willing to go." I stared at her. "And you just let him say that? What was I supposed to do? I'm barely holding on as it is. They're dragging me into all of this like I had a say in any of it." "You do have a say, Chloe. You always did. You just never said anything." That shut her up. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then she stood. "I just wanted you to know. Be careful." She left without another word. And for the first time since the funeral, I locked every door in the house, because something was coming, something bigger. And I had no idea how far they'd go. For the next 2 weeks, I barely left the house. I kept the blinds half closed, the doors locked, and a crowbar by the bed. It wasn't exactly rational. My parents weren't the type to break in at 2 a.m. like cartoon villains. But that didn't matter. Rationality had gone out the window the day they sat at Grandpa Arthur's funeral and talked about renovations like I didn't exist. The neighborhood was quiet, too quiet. Every sound, a car slowing down, a footstep on gravel, made my heart leap into my throat. And that's when I realized something awful. I wasn't just scared of them. I was scared of becoming the kid they always said I was, fragile, directionless, soft. I hadn't drawn in days. My sketch pad sat untouched on the kitchen counter, the same sketch pad I used to carry everywhere. The same one Grandpa Arthur once picked up off the porch and flipped through, whistling under his breath and saying, "You know this stuff's real talent, Liam. You keep this up, and the world's going to notice." But now, I couldn't even pick up a pencil. Every time I tried, my hands shook. It was like they'd taken not just the money, not just my peace, but the one part of me that felt like mine. And then came the letter. It arrived in a plain white envelope, hand-delivered. No return address, no stamp, just my name, Liam Hutchkins. Inside was a single sheet of paper, thick, formal, the kind you'd use for invitations or lawsuits. It read, "Notice of contest, pursuant to Nevada Revised Statute Section 14-3, 7001. David and Eleanor Hutchkins hereby contest the validity of the last will and testament of Raymond Hutchkins, dated March 14, 20XX. Grounds for contest include undue influence, diminished capacity, and fraudulent inducement. The estate will be placed under temporary injunction pending further review." I read it 3 times. Then I sat down, placed the paper on the table, and stared at the ceiling. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. They were suing me. Not just trying to intimidate, not just sending threats or planting rumors. They were formally, legally challenging the one thing Grandpa Arthur had left me, his final wishes. The house, the assets, everything. Frozen. Just like that. The next few days were a blur of calls and consultations. Mr. Davies connected me with a probate attorney named Sarah Jenkins. Tough, sharp, mid-50s, with silver-streaked hair and a voice that could cut glass. She didn't sugarcoat things. "They're throwing every tactic in the book at you," she said during our first meeting. "And it's not about winning. It's about dragging you through mud. Hoping you give up or settle." "I'm not settling," I said. She gave a tight smile. "Good, because it's going to get worse before it gets better." And it did. They subpoenaed Grandpa Arthur's medical records, looking for anything that could suggest cognitive decline. Every doctor's note, every prescription, every scribbled post-it on the fridge. They wanted it all. They claimed he was easily manipulated in his final months and that I'd inserted myself to cut them out. They accused me of exploiting a vulnerable elderly man for financial gain. They were trying to rewrite history. And the worst part? Chloe went silent. I texted her once, "Are you helping them with this?" She read it. No reply. For the first time since the will reading, I felt truly alone. The fallout came slowly, like watching a leak in the roof turn into a flood. My accounts were frozen under the injunction, which meant my freelance clients started pulling back. I missed deadlines, lost commissions, and ended up having to shut down my online shop just to stop the flood of refund requests. People thought I'd gone off the grid. I almost did. The house started to feel like a trap. Every creaking floorboard reminded me of Grandpa Arthur. Every photo on the wall made my chest ache. I couldn't even walk past the garage without picturing him in his coveralls, leaning over the hood of some ancient Buick, grumbling about fuel lines. And through it all, the rumors kept spreading. Someone posted in the neighborhood social media group that I was hoarding an estate meant for the whole family. Someone else said I'd forced Grandpa Arthur to rewrite the will behind everyone's back. I started getting weird looks at the grocery store, at the gas station, even at the vet when I brought in the stray cat Grandpa Arthur used to feed behind the shed. Everyone had an opinion, and most of them weren't good. I hit bottom on a Tuesday. I remember the day because it rained, rare in Nevada, and the leak in the ceiling finally gave out. Water splashed onto my sketch pad, warping the pages. I didn't even try to save it. I just sat there, staring at the mess, feeling utterly hollow. That night, I curled up on Grandpa Arthur's old recliner, pulled a quilt over my shoulders, and broke down. Not just tears, full body, chest-heaving sobs. For everything. For the betrayal, for the silence, for the years of being unwanted, for the man who gave me everything and wasn't here to tell me what to do. I cried until I fell asleep. And the next morning, I got up and made coffee. Not just for caffeine. For him. It was what he would have done. That morning, I opened the garage. It smelled like oil, dust, and old leather. His tools were still on the pegboard. His red shop towel still hung off the side of the workbench. I walked inside like I was stepping into church. And that's when I saw it, the old file cabinet near the back wall. I remembered it vaguely. Grandpa used to say, "That's where I keep my treasures." I always thought he meant old receipts and expired fishing licenses. But something nudged me to look. I opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a thick accordion folder labeled Ideas. I sat cross-legged on the concrete floor and started flipping through it. Blueprints, sketches, designs for modified car parts, innovations, weird hybrids, handwritten notes with titles like Cooling Pipe Redesign for 327 V8, and Hutchkins Custom Manifold Concept. All of it. Drawings, measurements, parts lists. And then I found a letter, handwritten, folded, yellowed with time. It was addressed to me. "Liam, if you're reading this, it means things didn't go the way I planned. First thing, I'm sorry. Second thing, don't let them take this from you. Not just the money, not just the house. You. You're more than the kid they kicked out. You're more than the tears and the doubt and the nights you wondered if you mattered. You matter. Build something. Anything. Doesn't have to be a business. Doesn't have to make you rich. Just make it yours. They took enough from both of us. Now take something back. I read it 3 times. And when I was done, I stood up, grabbed the file, and got to work. It started small. I reopened my online shop, but instead of portraits, I posted mock-ups of custom garage signs. Hutchkins Customs. Built, not bought. Tools, grit, and grease. Cheesy, maybe, but it sold. People liked the retro designs. They liked the story. I shared a bit about Grandpa Arthur, just enough to be real. Sales started trickling in. Then I dusted off my old tablet and started sketching again. Not for clients, not for likes. For me. I illustrated a comic strip based on my life with Grandpa Arthur. Nothing fancy, just short stories. Like the time he taught me how to change a tire with nothing but a wrench and a milk crate, or the time he let me eat ice cream at 9 a.m. because some rules are dumb, kid. I posted them to a small art page I hadn't used in years. And somehow they took off. One got shared, then another. Then someone messaged me asking if they could turn the comic into a short film. Another offered to license the designs for a found family and merch line. I didn't jump on anything yet, but the messages kept coming. I felt something shift. Not big, not loud, but real. I was building again. Not for revenge, not for validation. For him. For me. Then, just as I started feeling whole again, Chloe came back. This time she wasn't quiet. She was crying. And what she told me, what she handed me, it blew the entire case wide open. I heard the knocking before I saw the headlights. It was almost midnight, and I just finished uploading a new sketch to my comic series, a simple black and white panel of Grandpa Arthur and me sitting on the tailgate of his truck, eating sandwiches. No words needed. It had barely been live for 5 minutes before someone started banging on my front door like the place was on fire. I froze. After everything, the threats, the lawsuit, the slashed tires, my mind immediately went to the worst-case scenario. I grabbed the crowbar from beside the fridge, inched toward the door, and peeked through the side window. It was Chloe. She looked like she'd run the entire way from Las Vegas. Her makeup was smudged, her hair pinned back hastily, and her eyes were red, puffy, and wet. She was breathing hard, holding a crumpled envelope like it was made of glass. I opened the door, still gripping the crowbar. She blinked at it. You expecting zombies, or just mom and dad? Hard to tell the difference lately. I muttered. She didn't smile. Instead, she stepped inside, shaking. I can't do this anymore. I shouldn't have waited this long. Liam, I'm sorry. I closed the door behind her. Okay, what happened? She didn't answer right away. She just handed me the envelope. It was one of those cheap manila types from an office supply store, with a single word scribbled on the front in Sharpie copy. Inside were 3 pages. The first was a printed email from an account labeled private.familyfirm@gmail.com. The subject line read, Project Inheritance Contingency Plan. The second was an invoice from a private investigator named Troy M. something. Most of it was redacted with a black marker, but I could make out the words surveillance, target Owen Hutchkins, and duration 90 days. The third page was a typed letter from my father, signed and dated, addressed to a man named Marcus Thorne. It was marked confidential. Marcus, I appreciate your discretion in this matter. My son has proven to be more problematic than expected. He's leveraging the will for public sympathy, and I suspect he may attempt to monetize it. If we can establish a pattern of erratic behavior or possible manipulation of Arthur's mental state, we can win this. Do whatever it takes. Discreetly. I sat down slowly. My chest was pounding. My ears rang like I'd been hit with a flashbang. They hired someone to follow me? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Chloe nodded, eyes brimming. It started right after the will was read. Dad said they needed insurance in case the legal route didn't work. The PI's been watching you for weeks, taking photos, digging into your accounts. He even tried contacting some of your old clients. I stared at the letter again, a bile rising in my throat. And Mom? She knew. She said it was necessary. Said you were using your sob story to play the victim. I didn't know about the PI until a few days ago, but this, she pointed at the email, this is when I realized they've gone too far. She sat down on Grandpa Arthur's recliner and started crying again, quietly this time, like she was ashamed of the sound. I should have stopped them sooner, she said. I didn't know how. I thought if I stayed out of it, I wasn't part of it. But that's not true. I let them lie about you. I let them watch you. Something in me snapped. Not in a loud, explosive way. In a cold, clear way, like the exact second ice turns to glass. They crossed the line, I said. Chloe looked up. What are you going to do? I didn't answer right away because I didn't know yet, but I knew who to call. The next morning, I met with Sarah, my attorney, at her office. I brought the documents. She brought the fire. They hired a PI to dig up dirt on you while you were being sued by them, she said, practically vibrating with rage. That's textbook harassment. Possibly even a violation of the injunction terms if they used any of this to influence the case. And they tried to use it to frame me, I added. She nodded, scanning the documents again. We can use this. I want to do more than use it. I want to end this. She sat back in her chair, studying me. I don't just want to win the case, I continued. I want to expose them. Everything. The manipulation, the surveillance, the lies. All of it. Sarah smiled, a small, approving curve of her lips. Well, then, she said, let's set the stage. Step 1 was securing the evidence. We got a subpoena for the PI's business records, using the email and invoice as grounds. Turns out he wasn't very good at covering his tracks. Sarah uncovered billing logs, GPS tags, and a series of dated surveillance photos that included, I kid you not, one of me asleep in my own backyard hammock. Creepy, didn't even begin to cover it. Step 2 was turning public perception. I didn't want a media circus, but I did want to control the narrative. So, I posted a new entry on my art page. It was simple, a single comic strip. Grandpa Arthur and me again, this time seated at a table labeled Last Wishes. Behind us, faceless figures in suits loomed in the background, hands reaching for stacks of paper. The final panel showed Grandpa Arthur passing me a note that said, "Make it count." No names, no accusations, just the truth in pictures. The post exploded. Thousands of likes, shares, comments. Other people came forward, sharing stories of contested wills, greedy relatives, betrayals. I wasn't alone. And more importantly, I wasn't the villain in their eyes. Step 3 was preparing Chloe. She agreed to testify. It wasn't easy. The night before her statement, she sat at my kitchen table, drinking tea with trembling hands, reading her own typed words over and over like she was bracing for execution. They're going to disown me, she whispered. They disowned me too, I said. And I survived. She looked at me like she was seeing me. For the first time. I used to be jealous of you, she admitted. You left. You built a life. You had Grandpa Arthur. I looked down. Yeah, but you had them. At least I thought you did. I didn't, she said, and there was no sadness in her voice, just clarity. They only loved the version of me that obeyed. That night, we watched a rerun of some cooking show Grandpa Arthur used to love and didn't talk about the trial. We didn't need to. Step 4 was the wild card, the garage. I'd been slowly cataloging Grandpa Arthur's design folder, scanning each blueprint, writing short blurbs about his concepts, his notes, his ideas. I turned it into a digital archive, the Hutchkins collection. Then I reached out to a vintage car restoration company in San Diego. I explained who I was, shared a few sample designs, and asked if they'd be interested in reviewing his work for potential licensing. They responded in 2 hours. Yes, absolutely. Let's talk. By the end of the week, we had a preliminary agreement in writing, a design licensing deal that could turn his hand-drawn concepts into a retro accessory line, decals, custom parts, limited edition builds. It wasn't a fortune yet, but it was proof that Grandpa Arthur's legacy had value beyond the will. That I wasn't squatting on an inheritance. I was stewarding it. And that made the timing of the final hearing even more perfect. Because now I had a narrative, a witness, proof of harassment, and a brand new contract in my hands. All I had to do was wait. The day of the hearing, I wore one of Grandpa Arthur's flannel shirts under my blazer, tucked, clean, professional, but unmistakably me. I walked into the courtroom with Chloe by my side. Sarah had her game face on, and I had a folder labeled a legacy. My parents were already there. They looked different, not smug, not confident, nervous. David's hands were clasped too tightly. Eleanor's lipstick was too red, too fresh, like she'd reapplied it 3 times already. And when they saw Chloe walk in with me, Eleanor's face cracked. The judge entered. The proceedings began. I won't bore you with legal jargon, but here's what mattered. Chloe testified about the PI, the threats, and the internal conversations about the will. Sarah presented the subpoenaed documents, and I calmly, clearly shared what Grandpa Arthur had told me in his final months. I didn't manipulate him, I said. I took care of him. I made him laugh. I held his hand when he was in pain. I wasn't trying to win anything. I just didn't want him to die alone. And then I handed the judge a copy of the licensing agreement. His ideas are going to live on, I said. I'm making sure of that. The courtroom was silent. And then, right before the judge called a recess, Sarah leaned in and whispered, "They're cracking. You can see it." I nodded, breathing steady, because I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't the art kid with nowhere to go. I was the heir to a legacy, and they were about to lose everything they tried to steal. The final day of the hearing didn't feel like a war. It felt like a quiet demolition. Controlled, methodical. Each piece of their case, every shaky accusation, every manufactured insult, every whispered smear campaign was dismantled one by one until all that remained was dust. Sarah called it surgical. I just called it justice. The judge returned from recess looking particularly grim. He shuffled through our files again, our evidence, the licensing contract, Chloe's written testimony. He took a deep breath before speaking. In matters of contested wills, the burden of proof lies with those who allege undue influence or fraud. The evidence presented by the petitioners, he glanced over at my parents, fails to meet that standard. Eleanor stiffened. David didn't move at all. The judge continued. Furthermore, the court finds compelling evidence that the decedent, Mr. Raymond Hutchkins, made his final wishes clear, consistent, and free from coercion. The will dated March 14 stands as valid. The injunction is lifted. Full estate control reverts immediately to Liam Hutchkins. The sound that left Eleanor's mouth was halfway between a gasp and a choke. And just like that, it was over. Well, legally. But the real fallout came after. They didn't storm out. That would have required a shred of dignity. Instead, David stood with the stiffness of a man watching a lifetime of power slip through his fingers. He turned to Chloe, his own daughter, and said through clenched teeth, "I hope you're proud of yourself." Chloe didn't flinch. "I am," she said, her voice steady. He blinked like he hadn't prepared for that. Then Eleanor, who'd spent most of the hearing scribbling passive-aggressive notes to their lawyer, tried one last performance. She stood, smoothed her dress, and said in a loud, pointed voice, "You manipulated him. He was old. He wasn't in his right mind. That money was never meant for, I don't care what you think anymore," I said, standing up, my voice calm but clear. You already told me I wasn't part of this family 10 years ago, remember? She stared at me like I'd slapped her. And then Chloe spoke. No, Mom, she said. What you really meant was that Liam didn't serve your image anymore. He didn't fit your Christmas card. And now that he's not struggling, now that he actually has something, you want to take it back. Eleanor turned pale. And just so you know, Chloe added, her voice icy, I'm done playing the daughter you want. The silence was nuclear. Then my parents left, wordless, stiff-backed and tight-jawed, like royalty who'd just been politely exiled. They didn't look back. 3 days later, I received a message from my dad. Not a call, not even a voicemail, just a single text. You'll regret this. I stared at it for a long time, and then I blocked the number. Life didn't change overnight. There was no victory parade, no fanfare. Just peace. The house felt different now, like it had been scrubbed clean of shadows. I spent the next week clearing out the garage, turning Grandpa Arthur's old workspace into something new, something mine. I ordered new lighting, updated the ventilation, even built a small digital station with my tablet, scanner, and a vintage radio. I kept one corner untouched, the stool, the workbench, the pegboard of tools he arranged by size like soldiers on parade. That was his space, and it stayed sacred. The licensing deal went through within the month. We did a small soft launch, a limited set of blueprints, a few merch items, a heritage series of custom badges for muscle cars. The response was bigger than I expected. Word spread through online car communities. Restoration shops started calling. Collectors wanted prints. The best part? I didn't do it alone. Chloe helped with the branding. Turns out her finance background had a creative streak buried deep beneath the spreadsheets. She designed a sleek logo, an old wrench wrapped in a comic-style ribbon with the words Hutchkins built in Grandpa Arthur's handwriting. We started working together more often, awkward at first, then easy, like siblings relearning a language they forgot they shared. She moved back home and cut off contact with Eleanor and David. I didn't ask what they said. I didn't need to know, because we were building something better. The final piece of the revenge wasn't public. It wasn't loud. It came in the form of a single certified envelope I had Sarah send to their lawyer. Inside was a cease and desist letter, not just regarding the PI harassment, but a formal warning that if either of them attempted to use Grandpa Arthur's name, likeness, or work in any financial capacity, we'd sue them into oblivion. Attached to the letter was a list of every brand that had now legally licensed Grandpa Arthur's intellectual property. I didn't want their money. I just wanted them to know they lost. Permanently. According to Chloe, David threw a chair across his office when he saw the letter. Eleanor posted a cryptic, "You can love someone and still be deeply disappointed" status on social media, which got exactly one like from a Brenda who sells essential oils. Months passed. The house stayed quiet. I kept sketching. The comics evolved, not just about Grandpa Arthur now, but about healing, family, rebuilding. I told stories about the garage, the garden, the long Nevada sunsets he and I used to sit through without speaking. And one day, I got an email from a publisher. They wanted to turn the comic into a graphic novel. They said it had heart, that it mattered. And as I sat on the back porch, coffee in hand, flipping through the original sketchbook, the one that got soaked in the rain, now dried and wrinkled, I realized something. They were right. It did matter. All of it. Every broken moment, every betrayal, every quiet night spent wondering if I was worth loving. Because in the end, I found something stronger than revenge. I found purpose. Last week, I visited Grandpa Arthur's grave. I hadn't been back since the funeral. Not because I was avoiding it, but because I didn't know what to say. Now I did. I sat on the grass beside the stone, a simple one with just his name, his birth date, and the words "he built things" carved into it. And I told him everything, about the trial, the comics, the licensing deal, Chloe, the novel. And when I was done, I placed a folded copy of the graphic novel's cover beside his headstone, a sketch of him, toolbox in hand, smiling with his crooked grin, and said, they couldn't tear it down. Grandpa, I built something, just like you told me to. A warm breeze passed through the trees, rustling the grass like applause. I sat there for a while, and when I finally stood up, I felt taller than I had in years, stronger, free. And as I walked back to the truck, I realized something else. They didn't lose the inheritance. They lost me. And I'm the most valuable thing they never appreciated. That's the legacy they'll have to live with. And honestly, for a long time, I thought their judgment was the only one that mattered. What do you think? Did I play this right?